the good fortune of meeting and talking to Jerry, and I think you all remember I said, Jerry, I could have you on every week to talk to our community because you've got so much. Your story is just amazing. Um, Jerry, give folks a little bit of your background, and uh, I know this could take the whole hour, but if we can get the Cliff Notes version, I think it'll be a great intro to our discussion.
I'm a native Chicagoan. I graduated from high school in 1946, and I joined the United States Army so I could get the GI Bill and go to college. My family could never afford to send me to college, and I wanted to own my own resident camp where kids came and you took care of them and taught them stuff. And after I graduated with my master's degree in social work, I started working for the Jewish Community Centers of Chicago and worked for them for 47 years. And during those 47 years, I was director of our Camp Shy in Wisconsin for 15 years. And I worked with families throughout my career in JCC. I've been working with teenagers to nursery school kids, and I really worked with the family. And the people I loved to meet were the senior adults who came from Russia and from Germany, and the things, the stories they told, and what I learned, and how critical the family was in Chicago to them. And then the difficulty in relating to their teenage grandchildren who were American and they were from foreign countries. And I learned that when you unload when you unload yourself, when you share yourself with your family, with your teenage kids. For instance, my daughter brought me here because she wanted me to be safe from the virus. She said, Dad, you'll only be here for 3 months. Well, it's now almost 3 years. And 7 months ago in April, I moved into assisted living. And that was a whole new experience. And I shared that with my grandchildren. My grandchildren are in Wisconsin, Philadelphia, couple, one in Colorado and one here and stuff like that. How do you stay connected? And it's critical for me to stay connected to my family and to my grandchildren. I asked them when they were in middle school, to share with me every paper they wrote for their teachers, for their classes. And I have one grandson now who's a rabbi, and he shares with me his sermons. So that I said, I wanted to learn from you, and please teach me so I can learn from the papers you write. And I was never critical of their papers. I never checked for spelling and punctuation and all that stuff. What did I learn? And I ended up having several notebooks of all the papers they had. And when I moved, my daughter said, Dad, send all those papers back to them. And my grandson, the rabbi from the pulpit, he's in Philadelphia, he shared with the congregation in a sermon, read your old papers that you write when you were in college. You'd be surprised how terrible they are. And he also commented about how important the faculty people's comments were on his papers. Well, he's in a town where there's several universities, and many of those faculty are in his congregation. They came up to him afterward and thanked him for mentioning the work that they put in to correct and share ideas on papers. So anyway,
man, I tell you, how you articulated that was absolutely amazing, and I think that it's an important reminder for all of us. I mean, I am still fearful to this day to give my father anything that I've written because I know he will be critical. I think I love how you frame that. Is that looking at those papers on what you could learn, and what a wonderful gift to have that collection, to be able to pass it back to your family members. Before we move to the book and all the great initiatives that you and Deanna are involved get a little glimpse in the decision that you made to live in an assisted living, because this is a topic that so many of our audience wrestle with, whether it be themselves or their loved ones. So you had mentioned you moved from Chicago to be closer to your daughter in Los Angeles.
No, she brought me to this town.
In the pandemic. And then tell us, what was it like making the transition from, I'm assuming, her home, you were living with her in her home, or did you have your own apartment?
I was living with her in her home, and I never had the opportunity to meet people my age because they didn't, some of them walked down the street, but they were all her friends, and my daughter is 71, and I'm not part of that age group. And so that's why we moved here. I moved here. And it was at the beginning was a lot of sadness. I saw a lot of people that were sad, and many that were happy as well. The key to living here for me was making friends, and the stories that I heard when we sat and talked about our life, what our parents did, what they did, what careers they had, all those kinds of things. And I had to decide that I'm going to be my best friend, because there's times when you're sitting in your apartment and you're alone. Well, do I like myself? What don't I like about myself? So I went through all that, and then I got outside help. I got a psychiatrist that my rabbi here had recommended, and she was tremendous. And we spent several sessions talking about adjusting to this place and why it was kind of difficult. And then I met with the management here, and I said, what are the mental health issues of people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s? What are we struggling with mental health-wise? And so she made contact with an organization that sends speakers. This coming Monday, we're having a speaker on legacy. What is the legacy you want to leave? You're leaving for yourself and for your family. Before that, we had a speaker on grief. What is the grief that you experience, and how are you dealing with that grief and sadness? My son is a psychiatrist. He sent me a book on the joy of sadness. The joy of sadness. And the joy of sadness is that my wife passed away, and the joy of thinking about her is that she loved me and I loved her. What a wonderful part to have that in your life. Love and caring. And how do I share that with my grandchildren? How do I share it with my friends? But how do I embrace it for myself? Man. You're going to get me started on lectures.
No, like I said, and I think...
Deanna, you stop me, please.
No. Like I said, I could have you on every week, Jerry. You are just a fountain of great ideas and insights. And thank you for sharing that personal story. And but let's dive in to some of the amazing projects that you and Deanna were involved in. And what I want to share on my screen here is I believe this is your main website, Grandparents Unleashed, correct?
It is. If you click on the logo in the upper left, you'll actually go to the homepage for it, if you wanted to, which kind of gives an overview of all the programs.
There we go.
But starting with the About Jerry page, you can never go wrong.
Yeah.
That's the source of it all.
So maybe as a starting point, just tell us about this initiative and the how it started and how we can use your resources to make the world a better place.
This is the moment where Jerry and I are always quiet to see who wants to go first. I always defer to Jerry, and if things are true, he's going to tell me to go first. But Jerry, what do you want to say?
You go first, Deanna.
Okay. part down. So Jerry and I were introduced by a mutual colleague, actually a woman who was a longtime publicist who was closing her business. And so because you can always get such great advice from people who have done the work, I asked if she would meet with me as my business was beginning, and she said, you have to meet Jerry. So we met originally to help him promote. He had a first book that he had written, so we met for that. And what we found is the most magic thing ever is something called co-creation. You know, as a business owner, I really felt like my role was to go outside, do the work, and then come back and do like a tap show for Jerry to be like, here's everything I did. And what it turned out is that we're amazing co-creators. You know, I like to say 1 + 1 is 1,000. And that's what would happen this is really great. How do we get it into schools? And Jerry would say, well, I did this program at Deerfield. How do we take that? And now there's actually an online course that grandparents can get that has all the steps to creating a grandparent program at your school. Or, yeah, we started with writing stories, and then it was like we partnered with JCC, and there was an online program. We've had 400 grandparents across the country writing stories. Now we're turning it into a card game that families can have. So it just feels like that's what happened is with grandparenting at the core, with Jerry, with that just absolute kindness and curiosity and devotion to making families closer and better and stronger. And then me with like, okay, but how do we say that in 3 words and make it really snap? Those two things together have just exploded into so many programs and continues to just with that openness to ideas and how to help people.
Now, Deanna, would it be helpful for me to bring up the website here and maybe walk us through some of the different programs that you're all involved with?
Sure, absolutely. So, and you can even see the main things are across the top there. The idea of Grandparents Unleashed, that title comes from, that is Jerry's line, which is when grandparents unleash their creativity, the things they're passionate about, and share their wisdom, that they can transform both themselves and their family. So that's where that idea of Grandparents Unleashed comes from. And this idea of creating a culture of teaching and learning. So you've got the school kit,
Okay.
which is, the school program. This actually is 100% kit that you can purchase online. It's an online school program, but these are ready to go modules that schools can use to engage grandparents in the school. So there's a booklet that you can get as well. And Jerry, do you want to talk about, because Jerry, this started in real life, Jerry, with your program at Deerfield High School.
Let's hear about the school program.
Mm-hmm.
I started a program at the high school in my neighborhood, and I met with the principal and told her my idea about how do you help grandparents of freshmen coming into school enter their grandchild's world so they understand what goes on in school. And she said, Jerry, my best friend was my grandmother. So she was on board right away. And what we did was brought grandparents together from whose freshmen are coming to the school. And we had a panel of sophomore kids, boys and girls, that talked about what it was like to be a freshman. And then we had a member of the faculty that was in charge of 75 clubs that kids can join, so that they got a list of all the clubs that the kids could join. Then the head of the English department gave the list of grandparents a copy of all the books the kids would read in the 4 years they're in school. So I could read To Kill a Mockingbird because my grandchild was going to read that, and then we could discuss it. So we met with the person in charge of the psychology department, the social work department, and she said, what are the emotional issues that freshmen have growing up in our school? The friendship issues, the cyberbullying, which was a new phrase for us. What does that mean? Well, kids take their cell phone, they take pictures of kids, then they send a message to 25 of their friends saying, didn't she look ugly today? Or he had his shirt tails out or whatever, so that we entered their world. And then I wanted my grandchildren to enter my world. What was I going through? And I brought a couple of them here to where I am living now, assisted living, and they toured with me. They saw where I live. They saw the people. They saw my apartment. And we talked about, Grandpa, what is it like for you to live there? And I explained what I was doing. When I was camp director, I met an old forest ranger that said, always teach your staff and your campers to leave your campsite better than you found it. Okay, how do I leave where I'm living now better than I found it? So I created the idea of the mental health issue. I created the idea, how do we bring music into this place? And how do we give that people have a lot of time on their hands, but do they want to play an instrument? And some people played the piano when they were kids. Well, there's a piano here. Let's have, and so we're going to find faculty who will teach people what they want to play. And then we started a choral group. We got 14 people signed up for a choral group now. So how do I leave where I live here better than I found it? And my grandson, the rabbi, said, Grandpa, I say, how do I leave the world better than I found it? And so you share phrases, you share ideas, you share values. My last thing, and I'll stop, I created a value of the meaning of money when my kids were just started high school. And I gave them 4 jars. Like one jar says spend, another jar save, another jar charity, and another jar investment. And I gave them $20 a month in singles so they could put money in the jars. And they decided, and I worked this all out with my adult children beforehand. I never give a new idea until I clear it with my adult children. And they agreed to it. In fact, they helped me do a better job of planning how to do that. And so that when I would talk with my grandchildren, what are you doing with the savings jar? Your mother's birthday is coming up. Oh, gosh, that's right. I didn't remember that. And so we have discussions about what money means. Grandpa, when I take my spending jar, I always want to go to the shop with my mother and buy clothes. That was a granddaughter that said that. Guys don't buy clothes. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's great. And actually, Jerry, you brought up a discussion topic that we had on Kerry's when Kerry and I had our first discussion on grandparenting is communicating. It's one thing to communicate with your grandchildren, but navigating the communication with their parents can sometimes be more challenging. Right, Kerry?
Yes, and especially when you're at a distance. And so the kind of times that you get to talk are fleeting, or, when you want to talk to the adult children, there are children and your grandchildren in the background. So it is hard. And I think that's why when you have in-person visits, it's such a good time to, as Jerry just said, run an idea by them to see what they think, and to and also gives them ownership of it too, if you're doing it together and they get to have some input.
No, I don't know, Steve, if you want to, I don't want to pre-jump this, but maybe it's a cue for when we go there. The relationship with the adult child, the parents, is so important that in a 9-chapter book, 2 of the chapters are actually about that relationship. Because our idea is you don't get to skip a generation. So there's the whole thing of boundaries, there's being allies, there's if forgiveness, if there's been a bad relationship, you actually have to make the effort to repair that. So yes, that adult-child relationship. Not only is it critical for the grandparent, but what I have found as the adult child is that when the adult child works to bring the grandparents and the grandchildren closer, the whole family is rewarded. Because grandparents are going to tell the grandkids stories they never told you, because there was too much of the no, I have to teach lessons. They let it all out with the grandkids. And the parents says
now the book, this is a great segue. The book that you co-authored is called Where Two Worlds Meet, a guide to connecting with your teenage grandchild. I got to stop sharing there. I really, I want you to dive into this, but I can tell you as a parent who has raised children from birth to now one that's going to be 20 years old, the teenager is very unique. And so it doesn't surprise, well, I think it's a good strategy to create a book specifically on communicating with teenagers. How did this idea come about?
Wait, Steve, would it be helpful to show the video real quick, just so people have context for what the book is about?
Folks, okay, so let's click over here, and then just for folks, if you want to check this out on your own, you click on Where Two Worlds Meet, and then there is a video here that I'm going to play for everybody, and then we can continue chatting. I also want to remind our audience, if you've got questions or comments, feel free to just type those in the comment box or the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen.
When grandchildren are young, a sweet treat is enough to inspire their adoration. Then your grandchildren grow up. Suddenly, they are teenagers, and it's not so easy. Where Two Worlds Meet starts with the teenage years, a time when your grandchildren are discovering who they want to be as independent beings in the world. It's an action-focused guide to stay connected and even deepen your relationship with your grandchildren as you both age. Beyond meeting them where they are, true connection means understanding their world, their school experience, their music, their technology. And you want to invite them into your world too, to share values and leave a legacy. When grandparents and grandchildren connect, the family becomes stronger and closer across all three generations. This book gives you the roadmap